Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our very first ANAT Micro Talk. My name is Leah Barclay. I'm the discipline lead of design at the University of the Sunshine Coast, and I'm joining you today from Gubbi Gubbi country. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country which I'm speaking on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So some quick housekeeping before we get started. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available via ANAT's website after the session. If you would like to enable captioning, you can click the button at the bottom of the screen on Zoom. And we would ask all of our participants joining us today, please keep your microphones off during the session. Now we have with us the brilliant ANAT team behind the scenes as well. You'll see Melissa, Jen, Carolyn and Usha from ANAT behind the scenes with tech support today from Michelle Wigg. And please use the chat to share your name and the country that you're joining us from. The chat is monitored today by ANAT CEO Melissa, but we would ask that you avoid using the chat for too many questions unless they're absolutely burning questions, because we are drawing this session today from our questions that have been submitted prior to the start of this session. So I'm sure many of you have submitted some brilliant questions today, but feel free to engage with ANAT on the ANAT socials during this session as well. So we're going to get straight into it. This is a new series of micro talks, which are really designed to be these bite-sized conversations you can digest over lunch. And today we're featuring a really incredible panel of artists and researchers currently undertaking the 2022 ANAT Synapse Residency program with some really inspiring projects. So this is going to be such an exciting session, and this really builds on the success of the recent Spectra conference, and it's an opportunity to ask some of those tough questions about collaboration, learn more about the process and the really inspiring ideas behind these projects. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, ANAT has really been at the forefront of facilitating these kind of interdisciplinary collaborations for many, many years, and really looking at innovative ways to bring artists and scientists together. And this idea of kind of experimentation and innovation is really at the heart of what ANAT has been doing in pioneering this kind of research in Australia, bringing together and forging relationships across industry, academia, the community, government, to create these really unique and exciting opportunities for artists. So Synapse has been a truly groundbreaking program, recognised globally for its really innovative model of facilitating these kind of collaborations. And it's pretty inspiring to think that since 2004, Synapse has actually enabled these research collaborations between more than 100 artists and scientists. And we're very lucky to have 4 of the most recent ones with us today. So rather than me read their bios, I thought we would start by introducing everyone and asking them to introduce a little bit of background from their practice. So we might start with Anna. Over to you, Anna. Can you give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leah. And thank you to everyone at ANAT and the audience for coming today. My name is Madeleine Raupach. I'm based on Ngunnawal Ngambri land in Canberra, Australia, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land and any First Nations people that are here with us today as well. My pronouns are she, her, and for a visual self-description, I am woman in my 30s. I have short brown hair and I'm wearing a colourful stripy top today. So in terms of introducing my art practice, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I work across augmented reality, digital media, moving image, as well as some traditional forms like drawing and textiles, hand-drawn animation. And the current kind of focus of my practice is on temporality and alternative forms of mapping time and space, and to consider how technology shapes our interpretation of the natural world, particularly in the context of climate change. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Anna. Steph, would you like to introduce your practice?
Thanks, Leah. I am zooming in from Meanjin this morning from Brisbane, and I'd like to acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people as the traditional custodians of the land on which I am today. As a visual description, I am a woman also in my 30s. I have long brown hair and I am wearing a black dress today. In terms of my practice, I'm a dancer choreographer who's been doing a lot of, I do a lot of work in terms of experimenting with pushing the limits of human physicality and what might be physically possible for us to do. And I use circus arts within that as well. And more recently, I've been working, performing with artificial intelligent performance agents, as well as robots, and also in the context of motion capture and animation. And I'm really interested in the relationships between everything, thinking about those relationships as ecologies and how we might use embodied practice to open up collaboration in a really unique way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steph. Jonathan.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Jonathan Roberts. I am like Steph. I am also in Meanjin today in Brisbane and on the Yagara and Turrbal land. My visual description, so I'm a 52-year-old white man with very little hair, clean shaven, and today I'm wearing a black t-shirt with a very large QUT logo on the front to tell you where I'm from. So my background is I've actually got 3 roles at the moment here at the university and elsewhere. So my background is I'm an aerospace engineer who did spacecraft design kind of at university, then got into robotic systems. So my kind of career has involved robotics. My 3 roles at the moment are I'm a professor at QUT, so I do the normal kind of teaching of students and have PhD students. I am also the director of a newly launched ARC training centre called the Australian Cobotics Centre. So that's about collaborative robotics. And my final role is I'm the technical director of the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Hub, which is a not-for-profit company that assists companies adopt robotics. So yeah, 3 jobs.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. And finally, Brad.
Hey everyone, I'm Brad. Like Anna, I'm on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land in balmy 9-degree Canberra. As a visual description, I'm also in my 30s. I have glasses and I am not clean shaven. I'm more scraggly than Jonathan. And I have a grayish t-shirt with Star Wars icons on it. So I do astrophysics and cosmology. So how the universe evolves, how things explode in space. And I do random things that pop up, whether it be chasing space junk. Currently, a number of projects I'm doing are launching telescopes and high-altitude balloons. We're designing a telescope to deploy on the surface of the moon, as well as figuring out the intersection between how we do the current research we do in space and the evolution of space, and how do we understand the issues and problems arising from that, whether it be the proliferation of satellites or space junk, or the discussion around colonization in space, and everything in between. So I do a lot of also talking to school groups and the public. I run on the side all of the outreach programs at Mount Stromlo. I also do other random things like work on science fiction movies and things like that. But that's besides the point. And I also like a good black hole because who doesn't?
Amazing. Thank you, Brad. So as you can see, we've got some pretty incredible knowledge and talent with us today on this session. So the format that we're looking at is essentially a conversation. We're going to be drawing on these pre-submitted questions that have come from our registered participants and having a conversation about what's really happening in these amazing Synapse projects. So we're featuring 2 projects and 2 collaborations as part of this session. And what we thought we would do to start with is just offer each of these collaborative partnerships the opportunity to summarize their project in just a couple of sentences. And I think it would be interesting to hear these summaries from the perspective of both the artists and the scientists working on these projects. So we might start with Anna and Brad, just to give us a summary of your Synapse project. Do you want to start, Anna?
Sure. So our project looks at the recent kind of influx and proliferation of satellites in outer space, in lower orbital space, and the implications of their presence from various perspectives. And that's one of the things that I've really taken away from the research so far, is that whatever perspective you look at this problem from, the implications are different. So this has included kind of imagery, so creating images taken both of the satellites from astronomers, but also from the satellites looking back at Earth. It's involved looking at orbits and different ways to map orbits. We've been considering the radio spectrum and the use of that and interference in that context, and how that also impacts on astronomy. We've been looking at, thinking about space debris and space junk, and that's partly because Brad might want to talk more about this, but it's actually been literally falling from the sky as this project has unfolded. A particular focus has been on Starlink, because that's one of the major mega constellations that's being deployed at the moment, and there's a lot of data around that that's accessible. So I think I've gone over 2 sentences, so I'll stop there.
That's all good. That was a wonderful summary. And can we have a summary from your perspective as well, Brad?
Yeah, and just tagging on to that, 5 years ago, there was about 3,000 satellites in orbit. We now have just shy of 8,000, and we could be anywhere between 10 and 30,000 by the end of the decade. And the implications, consequences, understanding of this are hard to grapple with. And I think this has been the interesting thing as part of working with Anna, is this exploration through all these different views, quite literally, and what it means, and how do we communicate the science, the technology, and the issues and responsibility, and the uses all around this. And there's lots of ways that comes into it, more than just me, and that is the astronomy angle looking up. And that's what's been great working with Anna on.
Fantastic. Now, before we get a snapshot from our second project, I might just ask you both as well, what were your initial motivations in actually applying for the Synapse Residency? What inspired you to take this step to apply for Synapse and work together?
So my practice had begun kind of grappling with some themes related to astronomy in some other projects, and I had worked with Brad on some kind of teaching projects as well. And we just started discussing, collaborating a little bit more, and this topic came up as a really major topic that is happening right now, like it's unfolding every day right this very moment. So it seemed like a really timely idea to take on from a multidisciplinary perspective, because it is something that affects and involves everyone, everywhere.
And it's also a very visual problem, and not just visual in the sense of with your eyes, but through radio waves. When we say visual, it's a very experiential problem in interaction that not just humans, but literally the environment, and animals, and it's not just the earthly environment, it's the space environment as well. And as a field that is so dependent on interaction and quite literally observing, it's one where we haven't done as well in terms of visualization and communication of these forefront issues, which is quite surprising. And that's been something that has definitely come up as part of this exploration. I think that's fair to say, Anna.
Yeah, and I guess just one more point is that the satellites is something that the astronomers, it's contamination normally, whereas this project is actually looking at them. So we're actively paying attention to something that is normally avoided. And that's an interesting kind of art project.
Yeah, look, absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to dig a bit deeper into this project. But what we might do is bring Steph and Jonathan back onto Spotlight as well, so we can get a bit of a snapshot of their project, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper into your approaches to collaboration as well. But thank you, that was amazing. So if we can just get Jonathan and Steph back on Spotlight. And I would ask you both, perhaps Steph, first of all, if we can get a summary of your project in just a couple of sentences.
Sure. So our project is Cobotic Improvisations, and the project really began as a conversation between John and I around sort of reversing what John described as a common way of working in engineering, to look instead at how humans might interpret the intention of the robot, and also predict the potential movement. So dance sort of provides us a really useful lens through which to be able to explore that, particularly with dancers' knowledge and using perception of the body as 360 degrees at once, and not just related to vision as well. So the project is using the giant ABB robotic arm out at the Arm Hub, and it was also being used for another project called the Shorts project, and there's a conveyor belt there. So the logical choice for us was to fashion some kind of way of creating an experiment using the conveyor belt and the robotic arm to develop some scenarios. And so we chose working with boxes and being able to throw a box and have interaction between the industrial robot, actually not a cobot, and myself, to explore what this relationship between humans and robots might be, and using improvisation methodologies to develop different tasks and games that we could then explore our relationships together, and also push, for us, we've been pushing the boundaries of what's considered safe in relation to working with the robot.
Amazing, that's fascinating. Can we get a summary from your perspective as well, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure. So we find in robotics that there's a tendency of researchers to record a whole lot of information and then, you know, farm it out to their PhD students or beat on it at the desk. And a lot of the work is then not done live. But of course, some of our work we need to do live. So this idea of humans working with collaborative robots, you need that live interactivity to do the experiments, really. So as Steph mentioned, one of the key problems on the with the adoption of robotics with people, so this is when people are working in close proximity to a robot, maybe they're sharing a task or they're just working on separate tasks, but they're in the same kind of physical space. All of this academic work has been done for a robot system to observe the human and understand what the human is doing, so they can maybe avoid the human, or they can, the human is kind of in charge and guides them. But there's very little work done in the reverse direction, where the human needs to understand what the robot is going to do, and that's just, it's relatively unexplored, and it's necessary. You need both directions for robots and humans to work together. They've got to understand each other, and we don't want to rely on humans just somehow reading a readout or, you know, having something like that. They need to just be able to understand what the robot's doing just by looking at the robot itself, how it's moving, that sort of thing. So it's got to be intuitive. You shouldn't have to train the human very much to do this. It should be a natural way of them understanding how the robot's going to work. So an improvised dance performance or show is the ideal way to explore that.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. And I guess you've kind of answered this in a way, but what was really your initial inspiration for applying for the Synapse Residency, Steph? What inspired taking that step to apply for Synapse?
I guess a few things. One was that John had already invited me out to the Arm Hub last year to come and sit and work. And, by doing that, I had begun to sort of get a sense of the community out there and the other researchers. And I was really interested in all the work that was going on out there. I've also worked with John before on some other robot projects for engagement events for QUT in the past. And I'm really interested in the embodied practice methodologies that I've been developing, both within those projects and in terms of teaching other people about collaboration and interdisciplinary collaboration with different types of technologies, and how we can use them in a way to decontaminate people and take them into a much more holistic sense of using a whole range of different senses for perception and how that creates connection. So that's where it came from for me anyway.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, we might dive into some more of these questions that have been submitted by the audience, and I'll bring Anna and Brad back onto Spotlight as well, and we might leave everyone on Spotlight for these questions. I think that'll work. I'm going to jump forward to one of these questions just based on the introduction and the kind of snapshot that we've had of these projects as well, because someone's asked, you know, were you already connected to your scientific organisations you partnered with before the program? And I think it's quite fascinating the way you've introduced the projects. These are clearly based on you know, existing relationships that you've built over time and a knowledge of each other's work and practice. So the second half of this question that was posed was, what advice would you have for artists to really start building those potential relationships with a host organization? What would you suggest are the first steps as an artist to really think about how you, you know, present your practice to a scientist, but how you start building those relationships and collaborations to start a Synapse project? So this is particularly for you, Anna and Steph. Did you want to start us off, Anna?
Sure. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I just say, like, reaching out to people, particularly relevant people. So really kind of thinking about, for me, like my practice and what my current topics are and where I wanted that to go, and then doing some research into who else is working in that area so that you contact that person with being quite informed about what your research is, what their research is, and what the opportunities are for going forward with some kind of collaboration. So really thinking about it as a shared practice, not benefiting only one side, and kind of going from there.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's wonderful. What about for you, Steph?
Yeah, exactly the same thing really, and just really thinking exactly about that. What's the mutual benefit or the mutual exchange that can happen, and always about the dialogue between the two and finding that space in between where something really interesting might be able to emerge. And you might not know what that is yet, but having that sense of curiosity about the other's practice, and, you know, where, you know, and being able to propose something, even as, you know, I'm really interested in this, you know, does this, is this of interest to you? And, you know, where might this conversation lead us, could be another way in.
Yeah, wonderful. That idea of it being, yeah, mutually beneficial is really rich as well. So I guess, you know, we know that Synapse is quite unique in terms of a residency, in that it's not necessarily outcome driven. It's much more about this process and developing really strong interdisciplinary collaboration. So what is often really rich in terms of Synapse is these new methods, these new processes really evolving. So we're interested to know, there's a couple of questions that revolve around this, but what kind of collaborations and processes emerged that you found, you know, surprising and really useful throughout this process from both that scientific and artistic perspective? So maybe we'll start with you, Brad, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think for you know, what Anna and I were doing was, it sounds very simple and almost corny, but perspective, right? You know, it's like this classic term, but it's what Anna said earlier. You know, in astronomy, we've treated this as this nuisance problem, satellites and interference. And then it was one day she was like, oh, how come your visualizations aren't as good as this other group that tracks satellites? And I was just like, oh. But it was a really good question, because it was kind of like, we literally are doing the same thing, but one is ignoring and the other is focusing on it. And it really started to think about more broadly that perspective on what does this mean? You know, and as Anna said, during this whole process, we've had Elon Musk's junk falling in New South Wales. And it was interesting because in astronomy, we've tried to say mega constellations are bad with thousands and thousands of satellites. But in that process of doing and chatting and dealing with space junk and also working with Anna, it was a clear motif that arrived that was, that is one perspective, but that is not everyone's perspective. And so how then can you use this process with Synapse and the residency and Anna's work to communicate our worries, but also understand other one's perspectives, which is what we've generally have been lacking. It's very clear to say that. And it's not wrong, but that's just what we do. We fall to our own perspective. And so it was just this very clear realization, and in a field that always wants to be data-driven and clear in the results and calculations, that it's actually not as simple as we'd like it to be. And I think that was quite a powerful unveiling, even if you kind of know it, but to be confronted by it, I guess, in some way.
Yeah, fantastic. Did you want to reflect on that as well, Anna, from your perspective in terms of the learnings from that process and the methods that evolved?
Yeah, I think one example of that kind of shift in perspective is just working with images in a completely different way. So one of the things we did quite early on was using images from the ANU SkyMapper telescope. And again, going back to the satellite streaks that are normally just kind of discarded, Brad was doing a search that would actually search for them and find them. And then he would pass them on to me. And using some astronomy software rather than, say, Photoshop that I'm used to, and editing the kind of different layers of those images to filter them differently. And just the idea that we weren't working with visual color, but the intensity of light. So that was something that was kind of a new approach to working with an image for me, thinking of the image as data rather than visual information. And one kind of anecdote that reflects that is I was trying to layer an image to get some part of it to be white. And I didn't know if I was doing it right. So I sent what I was doing to Brad, and he wrote back and saying, oh no, that is white. I just hadn't considered that an artist and a scientist would see white as differently. So yeah, I think just those kind of different approaches to what I had previously considered quite concrete or simple processes in imagery even was showing a new perspective.
Yeah, wonderful. That's such a great example as well. Thank you. What about for you, Steph and Jonathan? So looking at, that learning through collaboration and process, what kind of, learnings did you have in terms of your process and methods of working together as artists and scientists?
Yeah, I can start if you want. So what I like about working with Steph is that we do shows, right? So we say on this date, we're going to do a show and invite hundreds of people, and they're going to be interested and it's going to be cool. And we have no idea what we're going to do when we say that. And that gives us this amazing deadline to just get something going, right? And this is sometimes where in my world of research and robotics, there isn't that pressure. It's not there. So that pressure is fantastic, because it then makes you start to learn how to do things with pretty much what you've already got. There's no time to buy a new widget to do this or to do that. It's like pull together whatever you've got and make something work. And in doing that, you then explore new things and find out new ways of doing things with the resources you've got at the time. So I love this idea of this high pressure deadline to perform.
And what about for you, Steph?
Yeah, I guess, the other nice thing, I mean, working with John is always heaps of fun. So there's always that. But I guess the other part is that, there's an interesting set of constraints to work with. And the constraints then lead us to really interesting discoveries or outcomes that you otherwise wouldn't arrive at. And so I kind of like that problem, like sometimes it feels like a problem that we've got this series of constraints and this is what we need to work with, and how do we do that in a way that's meaningful, and how do we do that in a way that creates connection between something that isn't human and those of us that are human, and all of the different layers, and thinking about how we can put those different layers together. It's always also a really community building environment. So that's the other thing, is that we've had, particularly this project, we've had a really wonderful opportunity to work with Dasan Gunnasing as well, as a senior engineer on the project, and looking at even just with Das, his approach to understanding the biomechanics of the robotic arm and thinking about working together really conversationally backwards and forwards about, how do we get the robotic arm to throw a box? What's the physicality of that? How does that read? Can we get it to go further? Because currently Steph isn't allowed inside the volume, and, all of those kinds of problems. It's fun.
Fantastic. Yeah. And look, this is a really inspiring conversation. It's wonderful to hear the learnings from both artistic and scientific perspectives. And, I think such a strong mutual respect in what you're all doing in these collaborations, which is wonderful. Now, we know that art science collaborations aren't always easy, and it can be really challenging for artists to go into a lab in that first stage of a synapse residency and, what other people in the lab might think. So there's a question around, what was the initial sort of response and feedback in the lab, not necessarily from your immediate collaborators, but from that, collaborative lab in general. Was there positive feedback when you first started your residency on what you were doing and why you were doing it? Or did it take some warming up to get everyone on board with your project? Maybe if we start with the artists in the room. So Anna and Steph, did you want to start, Anna?
Yeah, I mean, Mount Stromlo is pretty quiet. So, I was just kind of going there and doing my thing. Yeah, I don't know. Brad, did you want to jump in with this?
Yeah, I think because our field is a little bit different because, we don't have a lab, right? We have computers we sit in front of and analyze data, which is kind of this weird aspect. I think, in fact, that the payoff in that is going to be later for the work in Anna, when stuff becomes more promoted and public and even visible to the community, be like, whoa, someone did this, hey, great, because we never were going to. So I think it's almost the reverse, not in the process, but in the products and creative outputs that Anna is doing and will continue to deliver, about what that means for our community and how our community reacts to it. So I think in some ways it'll be quite special to see, with all the things that we just talked about, do the other astronomers or people or engineers start to think and view it differently, rather than, oh, they're doing that, great, Anna's doing it. No, Anna did this for us to think about it. And I think I'm kind of looking forward to that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that sounds very positive as well. What about for you, Steph? What were the initial responses in the broader, I guess, lab style environment?
I think, well, at Arm Hub, I just felt genuinely welcomed to the community that's out there and you know, being part of the weekly stand-up meeting meant that I, you know, had little snippets of insight into what everyone else was up to as part of Hub and the different projects that were going on. And, you know, lunch is also a really good opportunity to sit down and have a general chat about, you know, anything and everything, but, you know, genuine interest in, you know, what am I doing there and why? And yeah, certainly, you know, how can this move forward as well? You know, what are the next steps for a project like this? So it's good.
Fantastic. And I guess, you know, Hub has such a wonderful reputation for supporting wild and crazy collaborations. So you're I guess in a space that had some, you know, existing connections and relationships with artists and interdisciplinary projects, but that sounds really wonderful. Yeah. What about from your perspective, Jonathan? Was there any initial pushback or resistance, or it sounds like it was generally
not really.
positive?
I mean, Hub gets a lot of visitors. So everyone at Hub, Steph is simply part of the team, right? So, you know, and everyone expects her to keep coming even after this residency, because that's what she does now. But we get a lot of visitors, and so I wouldn't say there's pushback, but sometimes they're surprised when we describe, you know, the project, that there's you know, going to be a choreographed dance, you know, dance performance with this very large industrial robot that would normally be in a cage and is not in a cage in our, you know, in our shed. And you know, so some of the people that aren't familiar with this sort of work, they raise their eyebrows because it's, you know, it's very different to what they expect. Yeah.
Excellent. Now we've got a question here from someone who's a previous Synapse resident as well, and they're asking about the nature of transdisciplinary collaborations. And so they've asked, what are some of the challenging aspects of developing a transdisciplinary collaboration, and what strategies do you really use in their negotiations working together as artists and scientists? So we're asking, I guess, about those challenging aspects, but you're welcome to flip that into some of the positive aspects as well. I guess negotiating those different ways of working. Do you want to kick us off, Anna and Brad? Oh no, you go, Jonathan.
Yeah, so Steph mentioned in her introduction about safety. So that is one of the clashes in culture of, you know, physical performance and very, you know, conservative engineering. The conservative engineering approach is to keep people away from any harm, you know, that could possibly occur to them. And of course, if you're doing a physical performance, there's an inherent higher risk than doing that. So I wouldn't say there was any problems between how Steph and I work, but then when we go to the required safety people to look at things and sign things off, you know, you have to find all the right people. And, you know, if we just went to one type of person, they would probably say, no, you have to get in someone that's an expert in the other field. So it's all of our associated professional staff in our organizations that also need to learn to work together, not just Steph and I, because we have, you know, there's other people behind us in our organizations. And unless they understand each other as well, things won't necessarily work, even if we work perfectly well together.
Yeah, and again, it's all about listening, it's about relationship building, and it's about all of the, you know, mutual understanding again. And I guess in this case, it was also about asking those curly questions and also pointing to some really good examples, which are on the blog as well, of some types of situations where this type of work has taken place previously. And also understanding that, you know, I didn't know until I did some digging that there's also inbuilt software within the robot itself that called Safe Move that can actually do some of these things for us. We didn't use it, but, you know, there were some other ways to kind of circumvent and navigate getting closer.
Excellent, thank you.
We didn't have any safety concerns. It's not like we're not safe people, but, like, you know, there's nothing to hurt us. Unless it's space junk falling on you. But like, it was kind of something Anna said before. It's like language, right? Her white was not my white. And so when she showed it to me, I was like, oh, it's fine. Right. Like I never even thought that would not be white. And there was another time when Anna was setting up this receiver that could talk to satellites and download data directly and then transcode it into images on your computer. It took some while and finicky, and a lot of it was static, but I could see each static image was different. Even, to the normal person, it's like, well, what is this? But I could see, oh, well, that one's actually better than this one, even though they're still staticky, to help us on the right path. And so it was kind of getting this like not level of language and expectations from the different perspectives on the process and what you're used to, that I think was quite interesting and fun at times.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges was also just the unknown, like because it's kind of a big learning curve in just learning these new languages and processes and software to work with. So it's kind of finding common ground, even if it is making an image, like finding points of reference that you can share to kind of navigate that unknown. And then kind of just getting used to different schedules. Like, for example, when I was trying to tune into satellites, I was kind of like my schedule would be worked around these predicted satellite passes for the last couple of weeks. I'd be setting up my antenna like first thing in the morning and trying to be home at certain times so I could try and do that. And also the need for quiet and dark, and just kind of considering those as being necessary to different forms of practice. So
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Well, this conversation could easily go on for another hour. It's been absolutely fascinating, but unfortunately we have come to our final question. So just as a final question, initially for Anna and Steph, could you just very briefly reflect on, we will have to keep this one super brief too, reflect on how the residency has impacted your practice and what's next for the project? Will it continue?
Yes, I think mine's only just starting. So I'm going to try and go out to Sighting Spring Observatory early next year to kind of do some last or first things that we still need to do. And then I'm only just kind of starting to think of things or of outcomes of how this research could be materialized into an art practice. So I really think it's just been the start of this kind of new work, hopefully. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's really exciting. And what about for you, Steph?
Yeah, likewise. I feel like this is the start of the journey, again, a new journey. And also, I've got some really burning questions about artisanship and robotics and how fusing those two things together, acknowledging the craftsmanship that exists historically, and how to bridge the gaps to embedding cobots where appropriate within particularly manufacturing context, given that I'm out at the hub. But I'm super excited to see where we go.
Fantastic, thank you. And what about for you, Brad? From a scientific perspective, would you see Synapse as a catalyst for you to continue this collaboration with Anna and perhaps continue working with other artists in the future?
Oh yeah, I had 10 more project ideas, which is great. And there's only one Anna, and I annoy her with all my ideas. So yeah, and I think that's the cool thing, because in doing the process and in doing the discovery process of these things, you realize, oh, it'd be interesting to look at this. And as Anna said, with the space junk, there's a whole new thing that we were realizing just on that as alone. So I think not only yes, but once you do one, you realize there's so many other ways you can do and so many other things you can do that, it's just the start. I'm really excited by it.
Fantastic, thank you. Unfortunately, Jonathan has had to dash off to another presentation, but I have no doubt he would say he'll continue the collaboration with Steph and will likely be working with many more artists in the future. So that has brought us to the end of today's micro talk. Thank you so much to all the panelists today. It's been a truly fascinating and really inspiring conversation. It's so wonderful to hear that mutual respect for artistic and scientific perspectives and the really exciting things that are emerging from your collaborations. So thank you to everyone that's joined us for this session today. I'll just close by saying that ANAT is currently calling for applications for artists and scientists for the 2023 Synapse Residency Program. All the details are on the ANAT website, anat.org.au, which I'm pretty sure is in the chat. Yes, it is. And if you have any questions at all, you can contact Melissa Delaney, the ANAT CEO, at melissa@anat.org.au, which is in the chat as well. Hopefully we will see you all at the next micro talk. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.